Hello, and on this video of Sazhi's Zangpo, we're going to start talking about what the three principal paths are. And they are renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. Now, renunciation is the determination to be free from not only some form of suffering, but also its causes. And it entails the willingness to give up that suffering and its causes. It requires great courage. It's not just aiming to get something nice without paying a price. Renunciation also implies the belief in the fact that it is possible to be free from that suffering and its causes. It's not just wishful thinking. It's a belief that in a fact to be true in what are called three ways. And those three ways, one is clear-headed believing. The Tibetans say, Dangwe Depa. This is a faith that is clear in clearing the mind of disturbing emotions and attitudes about the object. Thus, correct renunciation clears the mind of indecisiveness, self-pity, and resentment about having to give up something desirable. Now, the second one is called believing a fact to be true based on reason. This is called Je Tsongkhapa. And it means that we need to understand how liberation from suffering and its causes is possible. And the third way is believing a fact with an aspiration toward it, which the Tibetans say, Ngundeki Depa. And with the other two stages of Bodhicitta, which is called aspiring and engaging, which we'll talk about here in a minute, we need not merely to wish or to be willing to give up some level of suffering and its causes based on a belief that we'll be able to do so. We need actually to give them both up as much as we presently are able to, and to involve ourselves in the practices that will enable us to eventually gain freedom from them forever. So renunciation also, having correct renunciation, some people come to the Buddha's teachings and they get all excited and they think that they have to cut their hair off. I know a guy who shaved his head the second time he came to visit our Dharma center. They get excited about this renunciation and they think that they're going to do it right away. And then they fizzle out over time. And the Tibetans have a word for this short-lived, all-excited renunciation. They say, Natung Pusuking Ngenjung. Ngenjung means renunciation. So it's this enthusiastic, fanatic renunciation of everything based on blind faith that these teachings are going to save us. But so correct renunciation entails a realistic attitude about the hard work involved. We can gain some inspiration from others, but we have to do the work ourselves. Lack of confidence that we can't achieve our goals is actually a form of laziness, and we've got to work to overcome that. Now, there are some meditations we can do to develop renunciation from samsara. And these four contemplations are called the four thoughts that turn the mind. It's called the Lodok Namshi. And the first two turn our mind away from concerns of this life. And the first one is called the difficulty of finding freedoms and advantages. And what we do is we meditate on this opportunity that we have, this precious human rebirth and the rarity of it. And I thought that was kind of strange, thinking about the rarity of our human birth, particularly the analogy that the Buddha gave. He said, imagine that there's this ring floating on the ocean, and there's this turtle that comes up once every 100 years for a breath. The likelihood of that turtle coming up for a breath right in the middle of that ring is the same rarity of being born human. And I thought that was kind of crazy. Until I started to think there are 10 billion species of animals on this planet. And if we could see a readout every second of what's being born, then yeah, human rebirth would be much more rare and precious. There are more chickens and pigs on the planet than there are humans, ants and flies and so on. So this is a rarity. And we have, particularly living in a country like America, we have this wonderful freedom to be able to study Dharma, that we have the freedom to believe. So you can do a little bit of research on the freedoms and advantages of a human rebirth, but we're going to get into that at another time. This is a good contemplation, something to reflect on every morning. And then the second contemplation is absolutely wonderful. It's called Death and Impermanence, and it's the impermanence of this life. It sounds a little morbid for a lot of Westerners, you know. I read these wonderful stories of Buddhist masters throughout history that would go to the cremation grounds where the bodies would be burned, and they would do their death and impermanence meditation, a reminder that we're all going to die. So I did my death and impermanence meditation at my grandmother's grave for about 1.5 years, and I had, you know, such an amazing realization. And what happened was I started taking the moments that I was, you know, experiencing with other people much more seriously, became more absorbed in the moment. The reminder that death is certain and it comes without warning allows us to engage in life fully. So these two contemplations are really good for helping us to turn our mind away from the concerns of this life, and these next two help us to turn our mind away from the concerns with respect to future lives. We look at the defects of samsara. That's the third one, is to look at how samsara is impure, it's impermanent, and it cannot bring lasting happiness. When we're looking for lasting happiness and everything we can experience with our senses, all of these sense objects are impermanent, you're never going to find lasting happiness there. Sure, money can make things a little bit more comfortable for us, but we go about sometimes very negative means to get the things that we need to be comfortable, and yet death is there waiting for us. At any moment it can come along. So it's kind of foolish for us to put all of our energy into sense pleasures. They're not going to help us. And it's the same way with any of these rebirths. You know, taking a rebirth in a God realm, according to the Buddha, is wonderful, and there's no suffering whatsoever in that realm. However, death still comes. And if you exhaust all of that positive karma to have a rebirth as a god, then the next rebirth is much, much lower and full of suffering. So we want to turn ourselves away completely from this cycle. And the cycle of rebirth includes all of these different possible births and their deaths in the god, demigod, human, animal, hungry ghost, and hell realms. Then the fourth contemplation is called karma, and it's action. And we're talking about the smallest action, which is the movement of mind. And that gives birth to actions of speech and body. So cause and effect is basically what karma is, that everything that you see and experience, some causes created that result, that experience that you're having. And if we learn to abandon the negative causes of our suffering and adopt more positive behaviors, then we're going to have much more beneficial experiences in the future. So these four contemplations are very, very important, and they're very, very helpful. But we also need a realistic attitude about how progress occurs. Becoming free from samsara is never a linear process, with things getting better each day. Until we're free forever, samsara will continue to go up and down. When viewed from the perspective of a long period of time, we can see progress, but on a day-to-day basis, our moods continue to rise and fall. Now, we need discipline and patience to endure the difficulties of following the Buddhist path, and this armor-like joyful perseverance, the Tibetans call tsuntru, which is joyful effort, to press on despite these ups and downs, with clear-headed belief backing our determination to be free from samsara, free from all future rebirths. Will not become frustrated or dismayed. Buddha said that it might take some beings 3 countless eons, and an eon is measured from the Big Bang that creates the universe and its contraction and destruction. So in Je Tsongkhapa's Lamso Namsong, the 3 principal paths, he differentiates 3 types of practitioner. There are the initial scope renunciation practitioner, with which our primary concern is turned to benefiting this life and benefiting future lives. And then he says that intermediate scope renunciation, with which we turn our primary interest from benefiting future lives to gaining liberation from uncontrollably recurring rebirth in samsara. The first is a level of renunciation developed in common with even non-Buddhists, Christians, Hindus, and so on, who aim to go to heaven. The second is exclusively Buddhist. Now, on the advanced Lamrim level of bodhicitta motivation, and bodhicitta is the wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Bodhicitta is this great compassion that finds that one's enlightenment is now a responsibility to help all other beings. And so everything that we do and think and act is in line with this wish, in this desire to help all sentient beings. And I might point out there that I use the word desire, and it's, as an English word, it's malleable. It has multiple definitions. And I've had arguments with some Zen practitioners who say, well, the desire for enlightenment is desire, and you have to give up desire. And the Tibetan response is beautiful. There is a difference between the desire for sex, drugs, and rock and roll and the desire to help all sentient beings. One is something to adopt, and the other one is to be abandoned. But so this bodhicitta motivation, renunciation, aims for the freedom of all sentient beings, all others, from suffering and its causes, not just their suffering of pain and not just the suffering of some beings. This wish for all others to be totally liberated from suffering and its causes with conviction that it's possible is called compassion. Compassion is one aspect of the bodhisattva level of renunciation. So to bring about the ability to help living beings, to help liberate all others, we need the other aspect of bodhisattva renunciation. And a bodhisattva is one who has dedicated their lives to becoming enlightened, to become a Buddha, to help all sentient beings. So we need to renounce not only the emotional obscurations, which in Tibetan those are called nyundrip, and those prevent our liberation, but also the cognitive obscurations called shedrip, and these prevent our omniscience, that state of a Buddha's mind. So again, this implies understanding omniscience, the obscurations that prevent it, and a firm belief that it's possible to rid ourselves forever of these obscurations. It also implies firm belief that it's possible for everyone to rid themselves forever of these obscurations. So now, I mentioned bodhicitta, and bodhicitta is, according to a text written by a bodhisattva named Maitreya. This text in the Sanskrit is called the Abhisama Alamkara, or in English it's the Clear Ornament of Realizations. And the Tibetans say, Semke Pani Jendunchir Yandit Zope Janchub De. And this means bodhicitta is for the sake of all other beings wishing to attain complete enlightenment. And this text is one that we will study in another one of the Sazhi Zangpo courses. But now there's two sides of bodhicitta here to discuss. It's categorized as relative or conventional bodhicitta, and then absolute bodhicitta, two different types here. And relative bodhicitta entails the compassionate wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings and to train in the methods to achieve that aim. So here we're talking about beings, specific beings, humans, animals, and so on and so forth. When you're out and you see, a worm crawling across the sidewalk, that compassion is for that creature also. So there is something that you can point to. But absolute bodhicitta is a little bit different. And this is a direct insight to the absolute nature of reality, something we call shunyata, or emptiness. And it doesn't mean that, like my cup is empty. It means that things and persons that we experience lack any nature from their own side. So one last thing here about bodhicitta is this the difference between aspiration and action. And one master named Shantideva describes the difference between these two as planning on going on a journey and actually going on the journey. So when you take the bodhisattva vow, there are two different ceremonies. One is developing the wish to achieve bodhicitta, and then there is the vow to develop the behaviors of a bodhisattva. And next video, we'll talk more about the correct view, which is the third of the three principal paths.